Hello and welcome, everyone. And thank you for coming to the Six Bridges Book Festival. We're glad you're here. Before we get started, to access the Spanish language interpretation services, please go to the bottom of your toolbar and select Language Interpretation. If you have questions, please let us know. You can type it in the chat box. Now, please, before I continue on, let me go on a couple of things that we should go through before we get started. If you haven't muted your microphone, please do that now. We'll have some time towards the end of our webinar and to answer some questions. So we'll have a Q&A towards the end. So go ahead and type those questions in throughout the webinar. And that will be all. Between now and then, we can have time to just listen to our author today. But let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Maria Romero, and I will be your moderator today. Really quick, I want to go ahead and introduce Mrs. Aida Salazar. Mrs. Salazar is with us today. She is an arts activist and award-winning author of the verse novels, The Moon Within the Land of the Cranes and A Seed in the Sun. She's also the author of 2 picture books, In the Spirit of a Dream and Jovita Wore Pants, the story of a Mexican freedom fighter. She has no pets, but dreams to have the time for a puppy one day. She lives with her family of artists in a teal house in Oakland, California. Today, she will be presenting her newest book, A Seed in the Sun. A Seed in the Sun is a fictional story about Lula, a 12-year-old farm worker girl with big dreams. She meets activist Dolores Huerta and joins the 1965 protest for migrant workers' rights in this tender-hearted middle grade novel. Now, personally, I enjoyed reading this. Just every single page of the book was just absolutely intriguing. It just kind of kept me going and going. So it was a quick read because I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. And it left my heart just full of appreciation and inspiration of all the people who have made everything possible as they fought and continuously to fight for farm workers' rights. But I'm going to stop here because who better to share with us about Lula in this beautiful novel than Mrs. Aida Salazar. Mrs. Salazar, hi and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much, Maria, for the space. Thank you to the Six Bridges Book Festival that has given me this opportunity to share with all of you about my newest book, A Seed in the Sun. So I have a little PowerPoint if I can share. Just a second. Give me a second, and we're gonna get this started right here. All right. So as I'm so glad that you described The Seed in the Sun, because it's kind of a hard book to describe because there's a lot of things happening in the book. But before I go into it, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me and my history. This is me at about maybe 6 or 7 years old, and this is my family. I was born in Mexico, and I immigrated with my family when I was very young, maybe about 9 months to 10 months old. And I was raised in the United States along with my siblings. Half of us were undocumented for about 13, 14 years of my young life. And then because of the 2 babies on the lap, we were able to apply for citizenship or residency in the United States, and because of an amnesty law that existed in the 70s when this happened. So this is my family and me. Of all of our work, all of our lives together have informed everything that I write as an author. When I was in the 5th grade, I was given a book by my 5th grade teacher. It's called Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. And it was such a illuminating moment for me because it was a book of poems, and it was the first book I ever owned. And he also gave me a pen. And back then there were these really kind of heavy pens, for technology. It was a very special gift, and you can change the cartridges and everything. Anyway, so that pen I used to write bad poems for a really long time until I got to college in the 90s, very early 90s, and realized that, and I read Latino literature for the first time, and then I saw myself reflected, and I went, wait a minute, all those books that I've been reading, all those bad poems I've been writing, all of that can be in a book. And that's when I decided to be a writer. And so in many ways, I was practicing to be a writer since I was in the 5th grade with Mr. Clark's pen. And now I have all of these books. And so I'm really grateful to my publishers and editors and many people who have made this possible. And my contributions to our literature, to Latinx literature, have been these, The Moon Within, Land of the Cranes, A Seed in the Sun, and now Jovita Word Pants is coming next in the spring, in March. And The Spirit of the Dream also came out last year, and Never Forgotten, Ojalá Supieras, and Paz. These 3 books to the left of In the Spirit of a Dream. Those books are actual translations. I didn't write them, but because I am bilingual, I was able to translate from Spanish to English and from English to Spanish these books by other authors. And it's been a great privilege to be able to do that for our communities, to expand access, because every book that we translate, that means more people get to read. And so it's such a wonderful gift to translators. And I just also want to thank the simultaneous translator right now, Anna, who's who's translating as we speak. So thank you so much. And then these other books on the over are like Living Beyond Borders, Allies, and This Is Our Rainbow, are all books of which I'm a part. I contributed one story or an essay in each of these, and so all of this is who I am. But now let's talk about my newest book, the A Seed in the Sun. And this book came about because of a request. My editor, Nancy Mercado, reached out to us and asked, she had just attended Dolores Huerta's 90th birthday. Dolores Huerta is an activist, and I'll talk a little bit more about her in a bit. And she said, you know, there's never been a book about the 1965 grape strike, these pivotal moments, and for middle grades, a fictional book. And I don't think that there has been actually across ages. There are some really important books about farm workers that really shed incredible light on how difficult life is for farm workers, like The Grapes of Wrath and like Elena Maria Villamontes, Under the Feet of Jesus. These books were incredible, but we still hadn't really had a books that had centered on this particular time. And so this is a historical fiction based on that time in history. And so, of course, Dolores Huerta plays a big role in the inspiration for this book. But of course, you know, I knew that Dolores's story is not one that I could tell, but I knew that a child could be very influenced by her, as I have been influenced by her and inspired by her. And these are, if you just pay close attention to the picture on the right, because I took these photographs and wrote scenes around some of these photographs. And you know, it's a historical fiction, so it's not something that actually happened necessarily, but it's kind of my interpretation of what happened. And so she's a real character in the book, but a lot of it is fictionalized, but very consistent with who she was. Right? And another big source of inspiration was El Teatro Campesino. As an artist with a huge community of musicians and actors and poets, I was very drawn by the work of El Teatro Campesino. In fact, some of Luis Valdez, the founder of El Teatro Campesino's sons, were my friends. Quinan Valdez was especially my friend, and some other friends who grew up in San Juan Bautista and came to Los Angeles, where I lived as a young woman. They introduced me to a kind of a deeper understanding of El Teatro Campesino. And El Teatro Campesino was a tool, of a theater that the Farm Worker Union used to help convince the people who were breaking the strike, called scabs, that to convince them to come off of the fields and to join the strike. And so because they used a lot of tactics, but nothing more powerful than El Teatro Campesino. In fact, Dolores Huerta has said that it was one of the most powerful tools for organizing that the farm workers had at the time. And you can see they were, not in a theater, they were out on the street, just with very, simple props, almost no props, and a lot of drama and a lot of fun. And in the book, my little girl, Lula, she wants to be part of El Teatro when she finds out what it is. And so this was a big role. And let me see, here we go. Another big inspiration for the book was my grandparents, my abuelito Chema and my abuelita Cuca, who were braceros. And they came to the United States in the 1950s. So, 10-ish years before the 1965 grape strike. But this is my mother on the right. And you can see this is her in school. She went to school for a little time in 1955. But sadly, my abuelito was on the back of a bed of a truck on the way out to pick the fields in McAllen, Texas, where they lived. And as he was driving out, or he was packed on the back of a bed of a truck with a lot of men who were also going to pick, the bed of the truck unhinged and broke. And of course, the bed of the truck, went flying, as did my grandfather. And when he landed, he was paralyzed from the waist down. And he spent about a year in the hospital in McAllen, where my mom was able to go to school. And but he was sent home with a pension, very, very small pension, and was never able to work again. And he lived in poverty for the rest of his life, unable to work, right? So this history is part of A Seed in the Sun in some ways, because my family, they were exploited in the fields. They made huge sacrifices in the fields. It's a tribute in many ways to them. And I use my mother as a source. She told me many, many stories about the time that they were farm workers in McAllen, because it was such a impactful time for her. Okay, so now I'd like to read you a little bit from A Seed in the Sun, if that's okay. And the title of the book was taken from this proverb, which is a Mexican proverb. It goes like this: "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds." A Mexican proverb. I'm going to read you from the beginning of the book, and I should say that the book is a book in verse. And so that means a story told in poetry. And you can see, let me see if I can pull this up. No, it will not let me see. It will not let me show you. Oh, maybe here. There you go. Yeah, you could see that there are very few words on the page. And one of the things that I love to do is, excuse me, I love to play with a placement of the words, depending, depending on what's happening. If somebody is arching their back, then I'll make the words kind of arch. If they if it's a waterfall of words, ooh, they start pouring down, and I make them look like they're falling down. And in fact, I'll tell you also, before I start reading, I know I said I would start reading, I also did at one point, and I'm kind of going to give it away, but it's so much fun. When Dolores Huerta makes a speech, we worked out. Let me see if you can see this. You see the shape of the text here. It's like the farm worker eagle, right? So so these are fun things that you can do with poetry that you can't really do with prose, and I have a lot of fun with that. And okay, all right. So let me start with Remolino. Imperial Valley, California, March 1965. I sometimes think about how I lost my voice. I could have buried it in the earth, in the surco, the long row of dry dirt where we planted onion bulbs last spring, while the heat of a too hot California day fell on our arched backs like barrels of sun. It could have happened when Papa screamed for me to work faster, just as I was singing along to Mama's song, louder than Papa's angry words or the drone of planes spraying the fields overhead. It could have been taken by the roaring remolino that slammed into us like the storm of Papa's belt when we upset him, an out of nowhere tornado ripping through the fields. Maybe that's when the dirt-drenched air pulled my voice out of my breath and caught it in the spin of wild wind. What's left is a whispery rasp, an orange-yellow mist that comes and goes like clouds. My real voice is either somewhere in the tumble of dirt in the onion fields of the Imperial Valley, or was taken by the anger of the wind. One day, I pray it comes back. So that's when she's remembering what it was to lose her voice. You know, I'm going to, if you just give me a second, I'm going to silence my notifications. Sorry about that. Oh, how did that happen? Sorry, guys. Yep. There we go. Sorry. Sorry about that. It's kind of not letting me. All right, can you see that?
Yes, yes. And while you do that, Mrs. Aida, I was just going to tell you that I personally, as a speech language pathologist, in the whole voice and the vocal cords, and as you just mentioned and read through this passage, I could just relate from the figurative meaning of speech, versus the actual the voice. She's saying, I pray that I find my voice, and it was just so powerful throughout the entire book on how she goes through that. So my head was just going through and through and through, from the speech perspective, obviously, but it was just beautiful how you did that, how you gave Lula her voice throughout the book, and then obviously at the end, which we're not going to give it all the way, but I just absolutely love that, how you gave her voice.
Thank you. Well, I seem to have lost my my Google slideshow. I don't know where it went, but that's okay. It was almost done. Let me read to you a little bit ahead, if that's okay. I'm going to read to you a moment where, there's a lot of things that happen. Lula wants to be a ringmaster. Let's see, let me think. So she wants to be a ringmaster, and she and the strike has begun. She and her best friend, Leonor, who's half Filipina, half Mexican, and whose uncle is Larry Itliang, one of the true founder of the Delano grape strike. He and the Filipino Americans union started the strike, and it was 2 weeks after the strike that Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez joined them. And so they were really responsible for this movement, and they were a powerful force throughout all of the organizing. And together they became the United Farm Workers of America. So Lenore and Lula, the main character, are arriving to a picket, and they see Dolores Huerta for the first time. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Dolores. Excuse me, let me get a little water. Sorry, it's early over here for me, so I haven't really spoken to anybody this morning. Okay, all right. Bullhorn. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Dolores. She's yelling into a cone made of newspaper that looks to be a copy of El Malcriado. El Malcriado is the newspaper. There is that powerful voice again, quick and strong, rushing into the makeshift bullhorn, pouring out a waterfall of words. Come on out, brothers. We are waiting for you. You are earning more money today because our brothers went out on strike on September 8th, and they are still out on strike. Does it make you feel better that you are taking their job? Don't be a traitor against us. Come on out and help the strikers, because only in solidarity there is strength. Lenore points at Dolores and says, she organized with my Tito Larry and the CSO. The Filipinos like her. She knows what she's doing. I don't understand what Lenore means by CSO, but it doesn't matter, because right now I only see Dolores. The workers move away from the road. Dolores stops suddenly. She grabs a sign and her newspaper bullhorn and climbs onto an old panel truck, her face pursed with determination. Someone yells, "She's climbing La Perrera!" I'm guessing that that's the nickname of an old truck. She's as quick to climb as she is speaking and continues right where she left off. Farm workers need bathrooms in the field. You need breaks and to be given water. The sun will dry you up like raisins if you don't drink. You need to feed your children. Do you want them to live in the misery they live in now? Do you want a better future for them? Some of the workers turn their heads to Dolores, much more visible now because she is high up on the truck, and they pause. The picketers watch her too. The cameraman that's there turns his camera to her slender figure, towering above us. She's like a ringmaster up on a stage, pulling us into the spell of her performance. Her voice booms. Farm workers deserve to share in the richness we help produce. Join us, brothers and sisters. Join us. She puts her makeshift bullhorn down and lifts her cardboard sign. Above her head, the sign is painted black with big white capital letters and reads, Huelga. She stares silently at the workers with a furrowed brow and beaming eyes that say as much as her words. She hushes us in that stance. We are all captivated by Dolores, who seems larger and mightier than the mountain beyond us. All I hear is the click and wind of the camera. Cheers break out suddenly. The workers drop their tools. They move out of the field and come towards a picket. The scab's stern faces bloom into smiles, welcomed by picketers who are holding cards and yelling, "Sign your pledge to strike here! Over here, get your union card!" Others are screaming and a chorus responds, "Que viva el campesino! Que viva! Que viva la huelga! Que viva! Que viva la causa! Que viva!" I count the workers again. 36, 41, 40, 53, 88. I can't, in this cloud of joy, I am overcome by a thought. Maybe I don't want to be a ringmaster after all, but an organizer as fierce as Dolores. So I'll stop there and we can go into questions.
So I was reading along, and earlier on you had shared the images, in particularly the one that had the sign Huelga, and
Yes.
you had mentioned how you incorporated such images into the text, and so as soon as you mentioned that, I was like, oh, I remember that from that page, which is on this particular reading, and I love how you on this particular reading, how you gave Lula the opportunity to connect with her inner self and say, that's the ringmaster I want to be. She looked at Dolores, and here comes this fierce, independent woman who has a powerful voice, which is what Lula had, obviously, and that's what she wanted to also have. And I think that was the clicker for her. I think that she knew she had found who she wanted to be. And from then on forward, she becomes part of, I guess, the movement, and along with her friend, obviously, because she kind of pulled her in. But then, later on, she goes in and becomes part of the teatro, and she starts going into also the organizational meetings and things that take place. So I think that's where it all kind of starts off into the story. But I just absolutely loved it, because I think oftentimes through life we go knowing who we are, but then we inspire to be someone else. And then when we see them, it's that's perhaps who I want to be like, or, achieve to be someone like that. And so that was just where I think for me, it went on for her. She had found who she was, and like there was no stopping. She was moving forward in the family perspective, as a child, and then obviously now as a organizer, throughout the movement. So again, I personally, tapped, like, I don't know if you can see it, but I was tabbing, because I was like, I have so much to share. And, I could semi-relate because we grew up in a farm. So she's narrating her story of the sun and the heat, the dryness of my throat, okay, I've been there. Okay. And so, and again, it's a speech path also, just the anatomy perspective. I could just kind of envision all of it throughout. So the way you wrote this book, it wasn't just the words. I love the imagery that you put behind it. I could just vision through all the different chapters, well, not chapters, but the poems, because you mentioned that. And it just took me right in. It took me right in, and I just skimmed the pages because I couldn't stop. Like, I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. And then, you get to the middle, and then you're like, oh, here we go. And then it goes off, and it just ends beautifully. And so I see that we have also a Spanish class who was invited, and I'm just very thankful that they could join us. As you mentioned, we have some time to do a Q&A. So if there are students in the class who perhaps have a question about the book itself, please go ahead and do that now. Feel free to, unmute, or you could also type in the question on the chat box. Or anyone else who's in the audience and who would like to ask a question to Aida, please feel free to do that as well. Let's see. I'm checking the chat box. Okay, but I do have questions, if you don't mind. Have you had the chance to meet Dolores Huerta in person and just chat in regards to her life, the movement? And I always wondered, as you were writing the book, if that was something that also was part of you writing the book.
No, actually, I hadn't. I tried really hard. So the book was written during the pandemic, and so everybody was on lockdown.
Of
I
course.
couldn't, so, and really, the only people who were out were the essential workers, the farm workers. They were out there, and so, but I couldn't really even interview them because of because of the pandemic. But I am going to be able to be in conversation with Dolores Huerta in next month. And so I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be an online event. And so, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. But, I had a lot of people who were not experts, but who were well versed in her life to interview and whatnot. But actually the majority of what I of the information that I got was through online research. And so at the end, I'll share a QR code that will send you to my website that has all of the resources that I used to pull together the book. And some of it includes the Muñoz in Delano, which is this incredible film that highlights the erasure of the Filipinos in the movement and in the history. It also then also a little bit of women. There isn't hardly any information about women, but there's photo archives, there's oral histories, there's a playlist of all the music. So yeah, I'll share all that. Those were my sources. But I also had two friends who worked for the UFW as adults, and who were farm worker children in 1965. They were exactly that age, like 12 years old in 1965. So I conducted hours-long interviews with them, and I asked them about their living conditions. I asked them about what it felt like to be out in the fields, and then of course my mother. But then also I'm a gardener. I like to I'm not happy if I'm not touching the earth, and so a lot of what came into the story emotionally, and my connection to the land and to gardening and cultivating and planting and growing, all of that came from my experience and what my mother taught me, who was also, again, she was a farm worker and had the greenest thumb you'd ever see. So yeah, all of that kind of contribute to it. And Dolores, luckily a lot of people have written about her, and so a lot of that I just got from interviews and footage that I found about her.
Wonderful. Well, I know that when she reads this, she's just gonna feel honored that you obviously, just compiled everything. One of the things that I didn't know myself was in regards to the Filipino community that SEMA had already kind of initiated the movement in a way.
Yeah.
And so I just loved how you also talked about the unity and how as a community they became one. It wasn't about the Mexican Americans or the Filipino, and then you also talked about how there were African Americans and just a variety of individuals who were working in the fields, but yet when it came down to the movement, it was just a community working together for the same purpose. And so I thought that was beautiful. So, you incorporated that history component that I feel oftentimes we don't hear about. So like anything else in life, if we don't hear about it and we're not doing that investigation ourselves, then we're not going to know the truth behind the scenes. So I really enjoyed that piece. I was actually reading and my husband was sitting next to me and I was like, wait, did you know? And so he was like, oh, here we go again. But, it was just it was a truthful, factual part of information that I had just this aha moment that I also didn't know. And I found it helpful too, that you put all the resources here in regards to, for anyone who wants to continue on and investigate, those history point so they can do that. So thank you for doing that.
Let me share real quick. Here, I'll say share. Can you see my
Yes.
screen there? All right. So yeah, so this is on my website. If you go into under
Perfect.
books, there's a resources link, and of course where to buy the book. But there's gonna be a teacher's guide coming next week. So unfortunately, was not ready quite yet. But there's a playlist that takes you to Spotify. There's with it, there's other books, other nonfiction books.
This is perfect.
Films and videos, archives, social media accounts to follow, activist websites, oral history. So this is all on my website, aidasalazar.com.
This is a must-have in all classrooms, I might say. It's just, how do you not have this saved on your, webpage? So this is something definitely that I'm gonna, push through the schools. But I see that we have a question from the teacher, Miss Elvira, who is the Spanish teacher at Lisa Academy. She says, what do you think the societal impact of the book will have? So I guess, what impact will this book have in society? Philip put. Okay, so it's coming from the student. His name is Philip. Okay, thank you, Philip, for your question.
Wonderful. What impact will this book have on society? Well, because as I was mentioning, we hadn't had in middle grade fiction a book that dealt with this time period. So, my idea is that, or my hope is that the book is an opening, just the beginning. There's only so much that I could have put in the book, right? And it's only one story to tell. The story begins 2 weeks after the Filipinos started the strike, and ends the moment that they go on the march to Sacramento. So there's only so much that I could tell. And what happens on the march to Sacramento, and what happens
after that
when the farm workers become a union and they start the greatest product boycott in history, the grape boycott, right? There's a lot of stuff to do. So I hope that the book is an opening, but also that it's a tool. I want people, and young people especially, to understand that that's history, but it's still happening today. And one of the saddest things in this research that I discovered was that the United States has child labor laws, so that protects children from exploitation and working, I think, in every industry except for farm labor. So children are not allowed to work under the age of 13, I believe, is when you can get your first worker's permit. In all of the industries, you name it, they're not allowed to work. But in farm work, they don't exist. So children are still exploited, and many work alongside their parents in the fields, who are also exploited. And women in particular are subjected to sometimes more exploitation because they're women, and there's a lot of harm that comes to women and in the fields. So those two things, I hope that that people understand, the readers go, wait a minute, okay, that was history, but this is still happening today. And so it's an opening, and I hope that all of the students across the country can read the book and be inspired by their activism, and then also know that they have a voice even when they think they don't. So that's the hope that I have for the book.
Thank you. And I couldn't agree with you more than that. I feel that just also bringing awareness, as you mentioned, I feel like we see oftentimes things on social media now that perhaps before we didn't know it was happening. So I think that we are seeing more of the reality in all areas and settings. So I think just having the awareness of how perhaps, how does my strawberry get to my table in the morning when I have breakfast? When I have that banana pancake, and start thinking and putting it all together. And after that, like you mentioned, I do have a voice, and how can I also be proactive within my school, within my community, and how do I support that? And there's means of doing that. We can use our social media platforms, or if there's the march, if there's something going on in that community, just getting ourselves out there and getting involved. So absolutely, I think that I wish I had this book when I was in middle school. I think it would have given my life a different path in regards to just, being more proactive. And oftentimes I think as Latinos, we don't voice our voice as much as we should. And so I think that's also something that I saw in this book, as I mentioned before, just being able to give Lula the awareness of her voice, and then using her voice. And oftentimes it wasn't her screaming or yelling or, saying si se puede. It was more of her actions and her work in the organizing behind the scenes in the teatro that she was doing. So there's different ways that, one can be proactive in doing things like that. So absolutely. I just want to say that I, again, love your book. We are homeschooling my twins. I kind of gave them the first grade version of the book. So I'm looking forward to do this book with them as next year and the years to come. And I'm very grateful with you for doing the teacher's guide and all the resources. Again, that any teacher could completely do a whole unit and then do a lesson, if so, with this book. So thank you for that.
I actually didn't do the teacher's guide. That's being done by Dr. Carla España and Dr. Luz Yadira Herrera. So those
okay.
professors are doing the teacher's guide, and I'm so grateful because they're brilliant.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to looking into it and doing a whole lesson, a whole unit. I'm trying to see if I have any more questions. I don't see any more. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we let you go? Because I know we definitely appreciate your time, and your time is precious to us. But
well, I mean, there's a lot that we were not able to cover, but the importance of young people reading is so critical right now. There's a lot of things that are competing with books, right? But the more books that you read, the more that you learn and dig deep and use the internet, use your phones for good, right? So
yes.
To grow your mind, to grow your brains, to expand as a person and contribute to society. Those are the ways that books can help us. And so this festival is amazing. The Six Bridges Book Festival, and brings so many authors together, and Arkansas is richer for it, and the entire reading community is richer for it. So thank you so much for having me.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to close off with your letter, as you mentioned towards the end, because I think it goes with what you just said, that you talk about how you want us to remember that which is planted when the right conditions, attention and love will grow. And I think that just kind of goes with what you were, just saying, that once we know what we need, I think that's where we're going to grow and move forward. And it was just beautifully concluded at the end. So thank you so much for your time. We look forward in hearing from your new book coming in the spring. I'll be following you on Instagram just to see about that published new book coming up. Aida, thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone who came in and had a minute to listen to this beautiful summary. We do have one more comment here from Elvira, the teacher. Your story, meaning behind it's beautiful. Thank you so much for the books. Okay, Spanish to Advanced Class, Lisa Academy High School
Hello,
from Little Rock.
Spanish to Advanced Academy and Lisa Academy, West
Lisa
High School.
Academy, yes, in Little Rock.
Thank you. Adelante.
Sí se puede. Right? I love that. I love that. Thank you, everyone who attended today's webinar. Thank you to our sponsors. I hope you guys have an amazing day.